This is your Park Rapids Area Fishing Report brought to you by Delaney's Outdoors. My name is TJ Erickson and I'm with TJ's Guide Service. We have finally hit our midsummer stride here as far as fishing goes. The last week or 2 weeks, the weeds have really grown up. Both shallow weeds and some of those deeper weeds are really starting to grow up. And what that does when we start to get that weed growth, it really kicks those summer patterns into gear. We're seeing a lot of panfish in and around those good green weeds, your bluegills, your crappies. They've moved off their spawning areas and they're in those probably 8 to 15 foot weeds, especially if there's some really good green cabbage or coontail. Some of those types of weeds typically hold those fish a little bit better. As far as bass go, we're starting to see those bass slide out onto some of those deeper weed edges. So we're catching some bass along those deep weed edges as well as up shallow under some of that heavy cover as well. Northern pike, those are hanging out on some of that deep mid-lake structure, but they're also hanging around those weed lines and even up into those weeds as well. When we're talking walleyes, I'm primarily fishing walleyes in a couple different areas right now. One is weeds. That's a common occurrence that you're hearing right now. Weeds are really dominating everything. There's everything in the weeds right now. There's panfish, there's pike, there's bass, there's walleyes. Anything that swims right now is kind of hanging around those weeds. So that is always a great option. When I'm fishing walleyes in the weeds, what I do is I target them in a couple of different ways. One is using maybe some spinners or something that I can move fairly quickly, and I'm gonna move right over tops of these weeds, especially with crawlers. You can do this with leeches and minnows as well, but I really like to do this with crawlers where I'm moving fairly quickly. I like to use maybe some butterfly blades even. Those work really well because you can move very slowly with them. They go down to 0.5, sometimes even 0.25, and they will still spin. So you can move slowly, but you can also move quickly with them and they will still attract bites and they will still be spinning well. So I like to kind of burn those crawlers right over tops of the weeds, going fairly fast. Slip bobbers are another. Once you find kind of a concentrated group of fish, you can use slip bobbers to fish in those weeds, and that's been very effective. And also working those outside weed edges, you know, anywhere from 15 to 18 feet, sometimes up to 12, depending on the lake that you're on. But moving across those weed edges with Lindy rigs, or sometimes even stopping if you see a group of fish, but primarily these are spread out all along those weed patches, all along those weed edges. So pulling those out a little bit deeper, and that's when I typically slow down a little bit to maybe a 0.5, and I will pull those maybe on a plain Lindy rig or maybe with a little bead, and that has also been very effective for fishing those weeds. The other areas that I'm catching walleyes right now are on their kind of deeper mid-lake structure, or even some of that shoreline structure. Maybe if there's some points that move out into some of those deeper waters, we're seeing fish on there, and also some of those humps, some of those rockier areas that are out in some of that mid-lake area. And one of the things that I've seen with those fish on the mid-lake structure is that they are much more grouped up. They're much more schooled up. So you can see big groups of fish on your electronics. And one of the most effective things that we've been doing right now is finding those groups of fish, trying to stay off of them 40, 50, 60 feet. That way you don't spook them, and casting to them. Maybe it's with a jig. One of the most effective things has been a slip bobber, being able to cast right on top of that group and let it kind of hang straight above them. And that will sometimes trigger them to come up and attack more readily than if you drop it even right in the middle of them. So setting it 2-3 feet above with those slip bobbers has been super effective. I like slip bobbers that have a brass insert and also that are weighted a little bit. That way you can see those bites a little bit easier and they sit a little more naturally. And then any kind of short shank jig, especially when you're using leeches or crawlers, works much better than maybe those long shank jigs that you see. So that's kind of how I'm targeting a lot of those fish, staying off them, fighting the groups of fish on those pieces of mid-lake structure and casting to them, trying to stay away from them as much as possible, because sometimes when you get right up on those fish, they will scatter and they will spook and they'll move out a little bit. So if you can stay off them, pitch to them with a variety of presentations right now, that has been very effective. And one of the things, if you're not able to get bites, I will move to a very aggressive bait, such as a jig and wrap or an Acme Hyper Rattle. Some of those are very effective when those fish are in a little bit more funky mood, being able to kind of rip those around there, kick their instincts into gear and get some more bites. The other thing that's been very important the last few weeks here is being able to have a variety of different baits. Every day I will start out with somebody with a leech, somebody with a crawler, and somebody with a minnow. That way we can kind of see what those fish are looking for that day, and sometimes it will change from spot to spot even. So I like to get a pattern down. Maybe it's 2 or 3 fish that those fish are biting on. Once we get a pattern, then we'll move everybody over to that presentation until it slows down. Then we might start mixing back in some of those other presentations, some of those other baits as well. So having a variety of different baits has been crucial. Make sure you stop in Delaney's to pick up those baits, pick up any other gear and tackle that you might need. They would love to help you out with whatever you're looking for. As always, we super appreciate you watching. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.